associate director here. Working with Friday Forum is one of the favorite things that I get to do every week, and I'm glad to have you here as a part of it. The University YMCA is currently celebrating our 150th year, and we have been doing this particular, thank you, it is a big deal. And we have been doing this particular program, thank you. A lot of you for 150 years. We've been doing this particular program for 96 years. So you are here as a part of a good long tradition. And again, welcome. We have a long list of sponsors, which my friend Michelle will thank here in a minute. I do want to do particular thanks to Michelle Nacy, who is a part of the Office of Diversity and Social Justice Education here for the University of Illinois. We have been partnering on this weekly series in different ways for several years now, and for the last couple of years we've been doing it on a weekly basis, and we're so glad for their partnership in this project. So thank you, Michelle.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Anne. As she mentioned, my name is Michelle. I work for Diversity and Social Justice Education. And as many of you already know, we have a long list of sponsors who help make this program possible. So I just want to read through that list of departments and organizations that we would not be able to host this every week without. So thank you to the Center for Advanced Study, the Center for Global Studies in the U.S. Department of Education Title VI Grant, College of ACES, College of Education, the Counseling Center, Department of African American Studies, Department of Psychology, Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Education Justice Project, the First Mennonite Church of Champaign-Urbana, First Presbyterian Church Champaign, the Humanities Research Institute, Illini Hillel, Institute for Sustainability, Energy and Environment, the League of Women Voters of Champaign County, Office of the Provost, School of Social Work, Sinai Temple, the Social Action Council of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Urbana-Champaign, the Student Cultural Programming Fee through the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign Friends Meeting, Urbana-Champaign Reproductive Justice, and then the Women and Gender in Global Perspectives Program. And now that I'm out of breath, I'm going to hand the mic over to Ross, who is going to introduce our speaker today, who I'm very excited about because he's a former classmate of mine, as well as an alum of Diversity and Social Justice Education and a Bailey Scholar with the University of YMCA. So we're super excited to have him. Ross, can you tell us more about Alex?
Definitely. What I'm so excited about is how many Alex fans are here. Raise your hand high if you're an Alex fan. Woo! Okay, Alexander Horton is incredible, and in his decade that he has been doing work around racial justice, community organizing, politics, and DEI, he has not only has he done some incredible work to push this thinking forward and this working community forward, he's also made really deep community, which I really love about Alex. I had a chance to first meet Alex when he was an undergrad. He was a student in my class on intergroup dialogue, and Alex has this way, for all of us who know him, to sit there and sit back and very quietly and slowly share these incredible amounts of wisdom with the group around his insights into the interconnectedness of things, the work of what justice looks like, how we should come together in solidarity, and how to make that meaningful. And that's some of the things that I think many of us here love about Alex. So Alex also is an incredibly humble person who was very cagey about sharing an official bio, as you can imagine. So I'll share some of the bullet points that Alex put together for us about who he is and what he's done. Alex's first political demonstration was through Evanston Township High School's youth chapter of the NAACP in 2010. He also interned with President Obama's 2012 campaign. He used the Black Student Union as a vehicle for his political work between 2012 and 2015, and he took a facilitating intergroup dialogue class, worked as an intergroup facilitator, and interned at the Office of Inclusion and Intercultural Relations, and insert his words, under the tutelage of the legendary Ross Marlin. That's what Alex, the only part Alex insisted we had to say. He studied history and politics at UMass Amherst Story, W.E.B. Du Bois Department of African American Studies, and he began his work with Ubuntu's second iteration during the COVID pandemic in 2020, which is a central aspect of his talk today. Alex attained his, one of the things I also like to say about Alex is that he shows up in all sorts of spaces. So I got to see Alex just before he started his MSW program here at the University of Illinois in May 2022 at the FedEx Center, Kinko's FedEx, where he gave me incredible advice about how to just cut a box differently so I can ship it out. Not giving his sale at Kinko's, but saving me an incredible amount. And so Alex's wisdom is everywhere. He's currently working to study trauma in the Black community as an impediment to organizing, and he'll tell us a little bit more about some of the work that he's doing. Can we give a big round of applause and welcome?
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me, particularly Ross for that incredible introduction. My talk today is entitled Ubuntu, Black Community Organizing and Coalition Politics in Champaign-Urbana. Being up here is an incredibly gratifying thing, and I'd like to give a particular shout out to Bishop Lawton through sitting through whatever the first draft of this was. It was horrible, oh my God. But 2 or 3 iterations later, it's something workable and something I'm proud of. Though a couple of members in the audience might disagree, I had the most important part of the talk ready 2 weeks ago, which is of course my outfit. So that being said, we'll get into it. A brief outline. I want to check in and just do introductions, both of myself and checking in with the audience. After that, I will discuss my framing of today's talk. Following that, I will discuss the origin of the term Ubuntu and the Pan-African inclinations of the organization, the inception of the work over a decade ago, the current iteration, which consists of political education, organizing, and mobilization. Also, finally, closing out with conclusions, a guest speaker for the guest speaker, and audience engagement. As I begin, I want to just say that I hope my ultimate goal is, first, for you to have an understanding broadly of the political work being done in Champaign through this specific organization, which is not to say anything of the various organizations we were in solidarity with, whether it's members of GEO SOLCOM, Bend the Art, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, as well as several religious institutions. And also, really just thinking about how to do this. When I came to U of I and my first Friday forum was with the great Angela Davis, I never thought I would be up there. And so I just want to lay out a few bullet points about how anyone interested can potentially be staying up here 11 years later. The first is showing up. That's half of it. Second, showing up consistently. Third, building both relationships and trust. And I'm sure we're all aware of people who we have formal relationships with that we do not trust. There's a significant difference between the two. Fourth, performing tasks when given the opportunity. One such task might be arriving at a mass meeting with 40 or 50 people and being told on the spot that you are facilitating with little to no preparation, which might have happened to me 2 or 3 or 4 times. And then just keeping this going over a period of years. I've developed in ways that I never really thought of as a junior in high school, just walking around the block, protesting school shooting that happened in the community of a high school member of mine, working Barack Obama's 2012 campaign, which is something I would never do now. But I want to be honest about where I started. I don't want to be holier than thou. Everybody has a place to begin. Whether it's with the movement for Black Lives, the Black Power movement, anti-apartheid work, whatever it is, you start somewhere and you go from there. I'm sure those of us who have been politically engaged none of us are too proud of where we are, that's where we were a decade ago, depending on the picture. And then also, before I get started, just the audience sharing out, I would like to, I have an idea of what I want to say, but I would like to get a couple of thoughts from the participants in terms of what you're thinking. I have 3 guiding questions that any of you can answer, but what brings you in? What would you like to get from the conversation? And also, do you have any questions about the topic before the talk begins? With that being said, we'll get into it. I'm going to be using Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. It's one of my favorite nonfiction texts and easily one of the most highly recommended I'll suggest for anyone who's broadly interested in Black politics. He breaks down a few things that are critically important. But first, talking about the man, I think it's important to read him in his own words. You will see him for his multi-dimensionality and also dispel aims. You will clearly see that he is a reverend. The doctor is referring to the doctor in divinity, which in terms of the context of the mid-20th century, in terms of philosophy and theology, there were very few people who were comparable in terms of his knowledge, breadth, and depth of these philosophical, metaphysical matters, as well as his background in sociology, which he attained in undergrad at Morehouse, and most specifically, an organizer of African Americans, his experience in the Civil Rights Movement, and his clear-eyed visionary thinking in terms of Black power as well. And also, you want to read The People Who Won, whether this is in the Soviet Union, whether this is in Cuba, whether this is in the United States. Martin Luther King Jr. came the closest to winning in terms of realizing his vision for the United States. And that's something that's critical. And also, the quote that I think is probably the most poignant in the entire book is that the real cost is ahead of us. The real cost lies ahead. And I believe that when you think about the condition of African Americans, the status of African Americans, where our position, it hasn't necessarily appreciably changed, but a lot of the heavy lifting has been done. It's now up to us to carry it forward. Continuing on, this is our conception, many of our conceptions of the Ubuntu project of Urbana Champaign. In Zulu, Ubuntu means humanism and direct democracy. Ubuntu's mission is to provide political education to raise the consciousness and equip fighters for social change with useful knowledge. What we have to consider is that this is a concept that is millennia old. And going on to the African origins, it's a fairly common term. And there's a few different ways to consider it before getting into its political dimensions. The term Ubuntu has African linguistic organizations, various groups across Southern Africa use it, and it has a couple of broad meanings. In a word, humanity, or humanity towards others. There is also the axiom, I am because we are, which is in stark contrast to the European idea of I think, therefore I am. For Ubuntu, there is necessarily a collective aspect to one's existence. Philosophically, cosmologically, in terms of worldview, it captures, quote, the belief in a universal bond of sharing that connects all humanity. That's big, but there's also political dimensions. And it's most famously used in South African politics, where it has been broadly used to refer to the ideals of participatory democracy and working towards the ideal of collective humanity. I think putting these juxtapositioning two figures who really couldn't be more different than each other, Barack Obama and Nelson Mandela. Barack Obama, speaking on Nelson Mandela after his passing, said, quote, "There is a word in South Africa, Ubuntu, a word that captures Mandela's greatest gift, his recognition that we are all bound together in ways that are invisible to the eye, that there is a oneness to humanity, that we achieve ourselves by sharing ourselves with others and caring for those around us. Again, Obama and Mandela are two political figures who cannot be more different from each other. Barack Obama's relationship to politics in Africa is one of imperialism, one of incredible destabilization and destruction, whereas Mandela's is one fighting for liberation, in many ways successfully so. But that does get at the idea of the ways in which this concept is used globally, and we're picking it up here in Champaign, as well as places that are completely unrelated, Danville, which is right down the street. By a show of hands, who is aware of who this person is? So many people. I want to just say that, first and foremost, the tragedy surrounding this young boy, Kewan Carrington, is before my time. And it is important that if you're doing political work, you need to study the area you're in. If you are not aware of who Kewan A. Carrington is, then you need to be able to sit down, be quiet, listen, and learn. Doing work even a decade later, it is clear how his death at the hands of police still ripples throughout the community. And I write that it is an event that shattered the already brittle relationship between Black Champaign and the police. This also led to the launching of a successful campaign to end the reign of Chief Finney. There's a couple of startling statistics I'll read off in a moment, but first I'm gonna read a couple passages from the piece entitled, "We Believe It Was Murder, Mobilizing Black Resistance to Police Brutality in Champaign." I want to make sure I get the context of this precise. So first, the broad story. On October 9, 2009, at approximately 1:30 in the afternoon, it is alleged that Champaign police officer Daniel Norris shot and killed 15-year-old, 5'2", 120-pound Kewan A. Carrington. Norvis, along with Chief Robert T. Finney, responded to a burglary at 906 West Vine Street, the home of Carrington's aunt, Deborah Thomas. Kewan, who had been living there since the death of his mother from pancreatic cancer a year ago, was attempting with a friend, 5'4", 140-pound J. Sean C. Manning Carter, to enter the home. So now, this is a story that's all too familiar in the era of Black Lives Matter. Similar to Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, or Laquan McDonald, is a couple of Black boys minding their own business before being beset by police brutality. Although the official story is that Norbit shot and fired the gun, Manning Carter remembers events quite differently. In the civil suit filed on his behalf by his mother, Laura Manning, Manning Carter claimed he and Kewan were standing in the back doorway to get out of the rain when two police officers, Chief Finney in plain clothes and Officer Norbitz in uniform, charged them with their guns drawn and leveled at them, yelling and swearing, and ordered them to get on the ground. According to Manning Carter, they both immediately complied by sitting on the concrete stoop near the back door. Kewan then stood up and walked toward the officers. Finney pushed him and he tripped over the concrete stoop and fell backward onto the ground into a seated position. At this point, according to Manning Carter, Finney fired a shot downward into the chest of Kewan. Kewan yelled out just as Manning Carter heard Finney's gun discharge. Manning Carter then alleged, and this is startling, that an officer other than Finney or Norbis threw him face down onto the ground near Kewan, and worse yet, who, as he struggled to breathe and just before dying, kicked him in the side, leaving a muddy footprint on his clothes. And again, that is the legacy of Ubuntu. That is what started a series of intellectual panels, which later led a successful campaign to unseat Chief Finney, and then later install one of the first Black police, Anthony Cobb. The statistics under Chief Finney's reign are insane. Only about 5% of police officers were black in a city with a 15% black population. I'm sure, as we all know, representation doesn't necessarily mean equity or equality, but it is a good indicator. Additionally, 658 of the 744, or 88%, of the people arrested for jaywalking were black. This puts people, black people, in contact with the carceral system who might not otherwise be there. And finally, mind-blowingly, African Americans were arrested at a rate of more than 2.6 times their percentage of the population. So there were more black arrests than there were black people in Champaign-Urbana. That's the reality of black life under Chief Robert T. Finney with respect to the relationship between black people and police. The second iteration, the one that I'm a part of, came about a decade later. I'm gonna just shout out many of the people who are here, a lot of friends, colleagues, and comrades. So the first iteration of people is they did a lot of work around the political education dimension. So Shea Robinson, administrator with Cunningham Township and an incredible poet who hosts the Speak Café series. The great Dr. Neville, who's a liberation psychologist in the College of Educational Psychology. Ruby Mendenhall, who does everything. Professor Lou Turner, who's a professor as well. And then, two incredible elected officials, both State Representative Carol Ammons and Champaign County Clerk and Recorder Aaron Ammons. And then the last four, Dr. Sundiata Shajua, Reverend Terrence Thomas, Dr. Gus Wood, who hates being called doctor, but he is, and also myself. This is the group, the last four of us did a lot of work in terms of the policy pushing. But regardless, we wouldn't have been what we were without, the collective effort. So, just speaking again about the importance of showing up to political work. I was invited, I never asked that as I was doing this talk. I never really asked how it came around or why I was reached out to, but I was invited to join the collective as they were preparing, or as we were preparing, to host a series of Facebook Live discussions. And my work was, again, just socially distant politics. I was living up north at the time, so I could engage just through a lot of, administrative stuff. Initially, it was a lot of just technological touches, but after a while, I took a more front-facing role. And again, if you watch some of those videos, you can tell I was working to step into this, and eventually I got it done. Our first episode in the series, Praise But Not Paid, COVID-19 and Black Workers, marked the first in a year-long series. And just when you go, if you go to our Facebook page, Ubuntu Project Champaign-Urbana, all of our videos are there. It's an incredible breadth and depth to our content that shows our range in political agility. We did sessions on medical apartheid, Black liberation theology, and probably one of the most important issues to African people across the world, reparations. It was highly successful, but it was also throttled. So just a word on censorship. I hope you know that I'm not a fan of the insane right-wing ideas that proliferate online, but we also have to think about what censorship does of those ideas. It creates really effective mechanisms that are always funneled back to Black people in general, Black activists, and the left in general. So, in our own real example, the initial series of talks, the first three we did, had a collective total of views of more than 6,000. Leading into the election, Facebook said it will be shutting down all political discussion on its platform, which they did to stunning effect, because our last three programs combined had a total of 1,500 views. So one video in our first three had more views than the combined total of our last three. And then these are some of the flyers that we did. Ready for Revolution, maybe I'm vain, but it's my favorite. That's the one that I was song, we were on fire, man. If you watch one, I think you should watch that one. And then also, let's talk police accountability and community control. This is the first one we did collaboratively and also hybrid with another organization called the Workers Center for Racial Justice. They're doing great work around building a legislative agenda across the state of Illinois that's based in coalition. If you're interested in that type of work, definitely get in contact with me after the talk. I can put you in contact with a couple of the key figures, and as well as the ACLU as well. So we also transitioned to in-person organizing in 2021. This is important. So this decision really shifted the nature of the work. We stopped doing consistently the Facebook Live videos, and we put a lot of energy into this. In many ways, we were successful. We were also offbeat. The context is that it came after the lethal confrontation between Officer Chris Oberheim and Darian Lafayette after a domestic disturbance that was reported at the latter's residence. Also salient is after this confrontation, the right-wing group, Back the Blue, was successful in unseating Champaign's police chief, who, keep in mind, was put in place after the ouster of Chief Finney, which is, again, a victory that was won years ago, being undone, and, wanting more police control of the community. We have 4 demands. Champaign will prioritize diverse leadership and screen for racial bias in police hiring, expand preference for candidates with degrees in African American studies, as well as other ethnic and gender studies. Candidates from Champaign or other similarly diverse areas should receive preference. And finally, candidates from homogenous communities should be disqualified unless they can demonstrate experiences that offset this deficiency. The importance of all this is in some ways apparent, and I could go into each to a certain degree. I think the most interesting is that when we were doing our work, most of the police officers who worked in Champaign did not live in Champaign. 3 out of 4 did not live in Champaign. Some lived as far as in Indiana. So if you're policing communities that you do not live in, you can't really say you're in community with them. After a series of mass meetings held at historic Bethlehem Church, base building through canvassing, media blitzes, packing city council meetings, and lobbying individual city council members, our efforts proved victorious. What was unique about our approach was the primary use of established media, and then we also diverged from the nature of our political education series and did not use social media except to publicize our mass meetings. This was done partially for the purposes of security, but also putting a premium on in-person interactions as the world began to open up as the pandemic progressed. We also came to city council meetings with concrete demands, and this is something I would like to stress. By a show of hands, who has been to a city council meeting anywhere? And I hope, maybe you guys share my opinion, maybe you don't, but there's some very unique individuals that show up there. And they come week after week after week and talk about nothing. So when we show up with clear ideas, identifying issues with practical solutions, as opposed to yelling at people and asking for money for unclear objectives, aims, and organizations, we are setting ourselves above and beyond the rest. These were our unique strengths. They carried us into the fall. The fall is where, in some ways, we did get a little off key. And this is where I want to just talk about the context in which we were doing our work. In fall 2021, automatic license plate reading cameras were suggested in Champaign-Urbana as a policy push following that of Illinois, the University of Illinois, excuse me. And we were doing work that in a national league, talking about abolishing police, we were more nuanced in our take. We specifically said transforming police, but there was a nationwide crime surge that Champaign-Urbana was not immune from. These are shocking statistics. So Champaign saw a 137 increase in shootings. We were talking about reforming the police while children were getting shot in the chest at point blank with untraceable ghost guns. Urbana saw a 216% increase in shootings. We were talking about police hiring practices while people's grandmothers' homes were getting shot up. And when you take the twin cities of Champaign-Urbana together, there's only one city of comparable size in the United States that had more shootings. So when we were canvassing door to door in the hot Champaign-Urbana heat, I'm sure Chelsea or Luke are well aware of how sweaty that was. But we were going door to door and people were supportive of our efforts, but knocking over and over again and hearing like, yeah, I like that idea, but we have to do something about these roads. Yeah, I like that idea, but we really need programs to talk about community and connection. That let us know we had to pivot. And from there, we did do a survey of the community to find out their different needs, and it was exciting. At the same time, though, we weren't as effective as we could have been in terms of implementing those policy suggestions. And also an observation that we talked about amongst ourselves, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I am someone who studies African American history. So I know that in St. Louis, the military sprayed toxic chemicals, and this is a documented fact, across St. Louis to simply see how radiation would affect urban areas. I know for a documented fact about the Tuskegee syphilis experiments, which led to internal review board standards. I know that the inception of gynecology came from experimenting on enslaved Black women. So again, context, I have no evidence for this, but something we talked about is just the timing of a lot of these shootings. Every push we made to get people out to city council meetings was preceded by a particularly grisly shooting. And if it's happening once, it's not that serious. If it's happening 3 and 4 times, it's a pattern that we have to really just pause and think about. Our last push was again around the Fire Finney campaign, which was led by the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I don't know what it is, but Chief Finney is like a cockroach, he just won't die. Like he stays coming back. I don't get it. But for whatever reason, Parkland hired him to teach criminal justice and policing at that institution, which is kind of insane if people are being brutalized to incredible extents under your reign of terror as a police chief. And, you know, in many ways, I would say we won that. What Parkland says is they decided not to rehire him. So, you know, administrators will find a lot of ways to say they did lose. What I like, again, just linking this back to King's quote, or King's book, is another poignant piece. We do need certain general programs for the movement, but not for use as supplicants. We require programs to hold up to our followers, which mirror their aspirations. In this fashion, our goals are dramatized, and our supporters are inspired to action and to deeper moral commitment. Again, our successful pushes show that in many ways we're connected to the community, but I think that last piece, deeper moral commitment, is something that we could have fairly improved on. And then another one is, I think this is for anybody doing any work, is on what scale of values is this a program of progress? When we think about trans people who are literally politically being worked to disappear from society, we have to talk about what's real in their lives. When we talk about the stakes of political work, when we're looking at the siege of Gaza, we have to talk about how the stakes are real, and it is not an over-exaggeration to say they are life and death. I would say that this Friday Forum, again, is a place to come, to learn and connect and build community with others, but we also have to do the next step of showing up in concrete ways and continuing to push this work forward. In conclusion, the real cost, again, lies ahead. The easy stuff has been done. We have to continue fighting. If Black people can beat 400 years of slavery, we can beat anything. And then what's next? This is something that's real. Is Shamar Betts here? Yeah. There we go. 1 second. In terms of what's next, there's a lot of great work being done. Is Karen Sense here? No? But I was gonna shout her out, but she's doing real work around mental health. The legendary Amani Bazell is here, and though in a sprawling 3-hour conversation the other night, she was very meek in saying that she's been out of the loop. But, and I understand why she would say that, just certain personal things. But she's back in it, restructuring on a district-wide level, Champaign-Urbana education. If that's out of the loop, I wonder what's in the loop. So if anyone's interested in that, definitely connect with her. And I want to be real in terms of the stakes. This is not something that's abstract. This is not something that's across the world. It is happening here. I would like to invite Shamar Betts up to talk about his experiences, and really let's take the time to welcome him and give him time to talk about the stakes of real work.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank Alex, of course, for inviting me here to speak and have a chance to tell my story. It seems like I've been waiting a long time for this opportunity. And I would also like to thank all of those who have supported and advocated for me these past few years, although we haven't even had the pleasure of actually meeting each other. The letters, the books, and just knowing that there was people out here that believed in me and supported me really helped me get through a very hard time in my life. Thank you. So, for those of you who don't know who I am or may have small information, my name is Shamar Betts. In 2020, when I was 19, after the death of George Floyd, I made a post on Facebook expressing my hurt towards the tragic death, and it resulted into rioting and looting throughout Champaign-Urbana. The outcome of that was I was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and charged $1.6 million worth of restitution for all the damages and things that were stolen, followed by 3 years of supervised release. The governor's plan to get the restitution is to take 50% of my disposable income a month until the $1.6 million is taken out. And I recently just found out from Janice Jerry's that the government's definition of disposable income is the money left over after taxes. I thought that it was the money left over after you pay your bills and things like that, but basically a life sentence financially. My plans since I've been out is to spread and shine more light about my story, to get as much support that I can with help from people like I mentioned, James Judge, who has published different articles with the public eye, one of them being Donald Trump versus Shamar Betts, and it kind of speaks and compares on how, based off of a conference that he had after all the uprisings through the country, the government found it necessary to label me as a domestic terrorist. And 7 months later, he started the insurrection at January 6th, as we all are familiar with. So that article, it speaks on how my situation was treated differently, although his resulted in deaths, his resulted in injuries, and it also destroyed a treasured landmark. Another article that's published to the public eye through her is called Diesel Therapy, and it speaks on my experiences while I was incarcerated, how I was moved around and kept away from other inmates so that I wouldn't have the opportunity to, I guess, incite another riot. I traveled different places over the country. A lot of times I didn't know where I was. I always was isolated, and that lasted for months. Along with a lot of other experiences that I went through. Also, I have been getting support from first followers, and they helped spread my story, and also have gave me a lot of help with readjusting to the community and getting back to society. And who I didn't expect to be here, Mr. Tracy Diggs, who is my manager at Dream, which is letting me take my lunch break to be here today. So I do have a lot of support, and I do have plans. Janice and I are working on releasing a memoir, which just speaks on the whole story. I do have a GoFundMe and websites, which was set up by Savannah Donovan, who's with the Anita Burns Angel Center, and it's like my mentor. But my goal here today is just to fill the ears to everyone here who hasn't heard about this very injustice case, which is national, and is going on right in the heart of our town. I feel like it doesn't get as much recognition as it should, and I would love to have more support and people alongside me as I fight this. My appeal is currently in the Court of Appeal. It may get bumped up to the Supreme Court for the restitution, so that is something that I'm continuing to fight. And I do plan to start classes with school coming up in January. So that's something I'm going to be working on along with other public events with Dr. Gus. We are planning to do a storytelling event at the IMC around November 11th or 12th. We haven't really finalized the date, but I would like all of you to stay in tune with me and see how I'm progressing. Right there is a
All right, just to close out. The stakes of this are real. Again, I don't take myself too seriously, but the work is serious. The work is life and death. This is a QR code to Shamar's GoFundMe. It is well below the needed $1.5 million. If violent white supremacists who shoot and kill parishioners in a black church can make millions, then he should be able to get a few bucks as well.
That's right.
We need to support and put real stakes on this. That's all I have. Thank you to YMCA for having me. Have a good day.